Channel open. Welcome back to WeeklyTrek, a proud member of the Tricorder Transmissions podcast network. I am your host, Alex Perry.
What's today's date? The date.
Today's show was recorded on September 20th, 2019, and is current through the end of Star Trek Discovery Season 2, so beware of spoilers. All right, let's get into the show.
Good day, Voyager, and welcome to A Briefing with Neelix. It's a catchy title, isn't it?
WeeklyTrek is a 30-minute news show covering the biggest stories in the Star Trek franchise. We are in a new golden age of Star Trek. There are 5 television shows in active production, possibly more on the way, and enough merchandise to fill the Bajoran wormhole. So stick with me, and I'll help you sort the real facts from a lot of the Dominion propaganda that you'll find online. But I can't do this alone. And my guest this week is returning guest, Patrick Escudero. Patrick, welcome back to WeeklyTrek.
Hi, Alex. Thanks for having me back.
It is my pleasure. So, Patrick, you know the drill. I want to know something that's got you feeling good about Star Trek at the moment. What's got you moving at Warp 10?
I was thinking about this, and it is definitely still, even though it happened last week, Star Trek the Motion Picture on the big screen. I was able to share it with my nephew for the 40th anniversary. And just looks as good as ever up on the big screen.
I had a fabulous time, more than I think I was even expecting to have. I mean, you know, the movie is, you can say what you want to about the movie, you know, how good the story is, but I definitely did get a new appreciation for seeing it on the big screen. I mean, it definitely is a very cinematic adventure in a way that if you're just watching it at home, you don't necessarily catch.
Yeah, it really, I mean, even from being 40 years old, it really still looks amazing up there. And it's one of my favorites, honestly. And sometimes it hits the top number 1 for me of Star Trek movies.
Awesome.
So it was even more amazing for me to see it in person for the first time. I was born 2 years after it was in theaters. And to share it with my young Trekkie nephew just really added to the experience as well.
I love that. Yeah. I mean, just, you know, the model work and some of the little details I hadn't noticed before, that the headrests on the bridge chairs kind of zoom up and down automatically depending on kind of what status the ship is in. I'd never seen that before on the streaming version, but on the big screen, it's clear as day.
Definitely.
So the thing I'm feeling good about Star Trek this week is on last week's episode, I talked a little bit about my theory for fan sets pins for New York Comic Con. We didn't get any more information this week about what they would be, but I did talk about how much I liked the Star Trek Picard family crest pin, and actually it's now available for sale on fansets.com. So San Diego Comic-Con exclusive no more. You can now get one of your very own. Probably should have waited rather than paid what I paid for this one, because it was a little bit more than the selling it for on fansets.com. But if you did not make it to San Diego Comic-Con and you do want one of these pins, you can now go get one.
It's something that I'll definitely be picking up. I did see this week the announcement that it was, available for everyone now. And I kind of go through these phases where every couple of months I go and pick out all the new fan sets pieces that I want to purchase and kind of get it in one big bulk package. But yeah, but I'm definitely a fan of fan sets and have a good number of pins in my collection.
And it's a great pin, and I know that I will be wearing it on premiere day, whenever that will be. All right. Well, with that, let's turn to the week's top stories.
There's a war going on, and I'm a reporter.
So it is a celebratory week for Star Trek Discovery in more ways than one. We have 2 sets of awards for that Star Trek Discovery received this week, and we'll start off with the big kahuna. Star Trek Discovery is the winner of an Emmy Award. They won the Outstanding Prosthetic Makeup for a Series. This is Discovery's first Emmy win. They were nominated for a couple of Emmys last year, including the Makeup Emmy, but they did not win. This Emmy comes for the episode If Memory Serves. That's the Season 2 Star Trek Discovery episode in which we revisit Talos 4 and the events of the cage, see the Telosians again. We get disfigured Vina, Spock's in it. So actually a really nice episode for them to have chosen to showcase the series. This is not Star Trek's first Makeup Emmy. It's actually its second. The other episode which won a Makeup Emmy, hold on to your butts, people. Yes, it's Threshold from Star Trek Voyager. Whoever would have thought that was an Emmy-winning episode, but yet it is. Discovery had been nominated for 4 Emmys. They only won 1. The other 3 they were nominated for were Outstanding Sound Editing, which they lost to Chernobyl, Outstanding Visual Effects, which they lost to Game of Thrones, and Outstanding Title Design, which they also lost to Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones had quite the cleanup evening at the Emmys, given that it was their final season, but they did not win the makeup Emmy because that went to Star Trek Discovery, which is super, super exciting. Don't you think, Patrick?
Yeah, I really I've been cheering on all the awards that they won in the last week, and this one I think was really special because we and I say we as in, us fans of this show, beat Game of Thrones, kind of the big one that was winning everything, and all of a sudden Discovery comes out of nowhere and wins for prosthetic makeup. Kind of the new person, it's only season 2, but I think it just goes to show the level of talent that is going to making this entire series, not just prosthetics, but the visual effects, the writing, the acting. And for me, if memory serves, was just the updates to the Telosians, seeing Vina again and the scarred version of Vina. It was really a good showcase, like you said, for them to show off their talents. And for me, it's not just prosthetics, but it's prosthetics plus performance, and that really brings you into that world. And they really took me from that 60s version of Talos 4, making it look even more real to me, and just feeling like I was on Talos 4 with those characters.
Yeah, there's a lot about Star Trek Discovery that deserves a lot of plaudits. Certainly from a production standpoint, nobody can deny that this is a gorgeous, gorgeous show. From the visual effects, the makeup, the production design, the sets. I mean, everything about it is just so, so impressive. And so it's fabulous that the makeup team won an award that recognizes the really just amazing work they've been doing throughout this series. I mean, if memory serves, is but one of probably, you could probably have picked any of the episodes of Star Trek Discovery and made a really good case about why it was a standout episode from a makeup perspective. I mean, Glenn Hetrick and his team really do a fabulous job.
Yeah, I mean, updates to the Andorians, updates to the Tellarites. Each of these things over the course of the first 2 seasons have been really spot on in my mind, just bringing Star Trek into, 2019, 2017 to 2019, and just really taking these beloved aliens that we knew from the 60s, 70s, 80s, and updating them and making them very believable for 2019. If I met an Andorian today, I would expect it to look like the one I saw in Star Trek Discovery in the last 2 seasons. So yeah, really well-deserved, honestly. And I think that's kind of what I just kept spewing out on Twitter with a lot of exclamation points, that I'm just glad that this team is being recognized for the amazing work that they've done so far.
And the point that you made around, this being a streaming show that's only in its 2nd season, that's on a admittedly pretty small streaming service, for it to have kind of bested the likes of Game of Thrones and of Chernobyl, 2 of the biggest hits of this year, regardless of what you want to say about the end of Game of Thrones. And there's plenty that people could do, and you can find a Game of Thrones podcast to hear about that. But 2 of the biggest hits of this year, and Star Trek Discovery is the series that takes the makeup Emmy, and it's not like Game of Thrones or Chernobyl did not have a significant claim to being Emmy worthy as well. So it's very, very encouraging.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I also noticed that Threshold was the other makeup Emmy win when I was doing my research. So I'm glad to sit this one next to that episode because that is a very interesting episode overall in Trek fandom. So
yes, we'll pit the, in my opinion, best episode of Star Trek Discovery so far against possibly the worst episode of Star Trek Voyager, if not the worst episode of the entire franchise.
Yes. Glad to see this Emmy win for a lot of different reasons, including that one.
Absolutely. So the Emmys was not the only party thrown on behalf of Star Trek Discovery last week. Discovery also won 3 Saturn Awards, the 3 Saturn Awards that they had been nominated for. Those awards were Best Streaming for Science Fiction, Action, and Fantasy Series. Doug Jones won his first ever Saturn Award, despite having been nominated several times. He's never won one before, which I was extremely surprised to hear. And actually, he gave quite a moving acceptance speech.
Wow, hi. Oh, hi. This is, I have presented this award to so many people over so many years with my rich history with the Saturn Awards, and I've accepted on behalf of other people, but to hold one of my own is actually quite surreal, and I'm so grateful. Wow. Thank you. The Saturn Awards and the Academy of Science Fiction, Horror and Fantasy is the one Academy voting body that actually gets me. And you're my people, and I thank you dearly from the bottom of my heart for that. The other shows are great, but this is the one that I've always coveted, really. And to take this home is going to be, I'm never going to let it go now. I also need to thank everyone at CBS All Access and Secret Hideout. Alex Kurtzman and Michelle Paradise, thank you, and the entire writer's room for giving me such luscious material, a layered character with depth that is unusual for an alien. So I thank you for letting me be Saru. Also, to my makeup team, it takes a village to make a Kelpian. So everyone at Alchemy Labs, Glenn Hetrick and Neville Page, James McKinnon and the entire team in the Season 2 makeup trailer, I would not be as pretty as I am without you. My lovely Mrs. Laurie, my lovely wife of 35 years, I wouldn't be standing here without you. In fact, I probably would not be standing anywhere without you, so I do love you dearly. Also, anyone watching at home who might be a geeky teenager like I was when I saw the Saturn Awards in its first broadcast in 1970-something. I was sitting in Indiana with my long, skinny neck and my gangly body and my face that I thought was the ugliest thing on earth. I thought there was no place for me in the world. I found some people that were. And I want you to know that I am a living testament that it does get better, and there are other worlds where you will be found beautiful. Stick with it. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
And lastly, Sonequa Martin Green won Best Actress in a Streaming Presentation. This is not the first Saturn win for Star Trek Discovery. They did win some awards last year as well, but it's great to see them back. And again, these shows are going up against pretty stiff competition. Discovery beat out The Expanse, which is actually a really, really good science fiction show. You think that because, it's the Saturn Awards and they just focus on science fiction and horror, that means that the competition is a little less stiff. But, when you're going up against a show like The Expanse, which is, I think, one of the most popular science fiction shows that's been on television for a decade, again, that says something very highly about Discovery, that they were ultimately the winner of a Saturn Award. Don't you think, Patrick?
Yeah, and like you said, the competition here was interesting. For Best Streaming, we've got Black Mirror, The Expanse, Jack Ryan, because it was also an action, I guess, category as well. I like all three of those series. Pretty big fan. And some of that, Black Mirror has gotten a lot of praise. The Expanse has gotten a lot of praise. So it's good to see Discovery holding its own against these other series and people recognizing that it is very good and it does deserve these accolades. As for Doug Jones's win, I was also really, really surprised. And I went back and tried to do some research just to, make sure it was true that it was his first Saturn Award. Someone that has done so much in the sci-fi and horror realm, especially creating all these wonderful characters behind prosthetics. I really would have thought he had won something prior to this. So it was just wonderful to see. He seems like such an amazing person, such a genuinely nice guy, and that's all I've heard from fans that have met him as well. So it's good to see somebody that's at the top of his game like that finally get the accolades that I think he deserved. Same with Sonequa, winning that Best Actress in a Streaming Presentation. I love her as Michael Burnham. She really, really does lead this cast both on and off screen. So it's really just great that people are recognizing that there's talent here and it's deserving of these awards.
Yeah, it is a good week to be affiliated in any way with Star Trek Discovery, and it's a good week to be a Star Trek fan.
Exactly.
So this is good all around. Well, that was Discovery's great week at awards ceremonies. Now we'll pivot to the corporate side. We got a little bit of insight into some of the corporate thinking about the Star Trek franchise at the moment. CBS Chief Creative Officer David Nevins was appearing at the Bank of America Merrill Lynch 2019 Media Communications and Entertainment Conference. That sounded like it was a barrel of laughs, and gave a presentation at the conference talking about the merger between Viacom and CBS. It was his first public comments since the merger was announced. and also talked a little bit about some of the strategies behind some of the various brands that they have, including Star Trek. And basically, all this is leading into him saying what we sort of already know from the shows that they've announced, which is, and some of the work they've been doing to kind of direct more Star Trek content to a younger audience, which is that they're really interested right now in growing a younger audience for the franchise. So he said about Star Trek that it's got a long history, but it's a little, we want to get the audience a little younger and we want to get it a little more relevant to people. There's going to be an animated Star Trek on Nickelodeon that's already happening. So you're exposing it and hopefully you create this virtuous ecosystem between all the platforms that Viacom CBS offers. Effectively saying, this is something we've talked about before, the fan base for Star Trek as a franchise is aging. And I think it is important for them to find ways to bring new blood into the franchise. And the focus that they've put on animated Star Trek, this Nickelodeon show, which hopefully we'll find out some more details about soon, is one way of doing that. But we've seen it sort of filter through in other ways as well. I mean, last week we talked a bit about the changes that have been made to StarTrek.com. And honestly, I think, some of the new content that they've got up there is entirely pitched at bringing in a younger audience. These aren't these sort of more staid interviews and production reports and book announcements. A lot of the features they've had since the editorial change have been skewed very much, it feels like, towards trying to find much more fun content designed to engage a younger audience and to make a bit more of a splash. And so we're starting to see that kind of materialize across all of the different platforms that Star Trek has. But Patrick, I know you have a nephew who you're in the process of turning into a big Star Trek fan. So this must be continue to be a positive development.
It's interesting to me, and I think it's smart on the part of CBS. And yes, my nephew's 10 now. It's been probably a year and a half or so that I've been introducing him to Trek. And I can say at this point, I'm not really turning him into a Trekkie. He already is one. We could probably take him to a Star Trek trivia tournament and do pretty well with just him answering questions at this point. But I'm glad that they're focusing on that younger audience. And I've sensed a little bit of fear from some fans online. I'm not totally sure why. Maybe it's a little bit fear of oversaturation. Maybe they think the content's not going to be that good. But I'm not of that opinion at all, because for those of us that were at STLV, Mike McMahon working on Lower Decks and the writers there were just very enthusiastic about it. That was the Lower Decks panel at STLV was really good. And even the writers for the series were just kind of walking among us as fans, just like we were. So there's a lot of great enthusiasm there. And we haven't heard too much about the Nickelodeon animated series. But I think if you look at the other Star franchise, Star Wars, they did a really good job with Clone Wars and with Rebels, not only gearing it towards that younger audience, which Star Wars arguably already was geared towards a younger audience, but also having these animated series that to still tell good stories, And as an adult, I've watched both of those series. I've seen Rebels in its entirety and really appreciate the stories that they told there. So I think just because I think the word animated sometimes gets a bad reaction from some of the adult fans, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. I think it's shown that it can be done well, and you can bring in that younger audience. My nephew started out with Star Trek Beyond as his first movie, but now over the last year and a half, his favorite is actually TOS and the TOS movies. But to have something that's on Nickelodeon, which is a channel that's on his TV with his sister, who's 5 years old, my niece, pretty much every day, that's going to really help keep him engaged and probably also get her engaged a little bit as well. So I don't think that there's anything wrong with, what they're doing here. Like I said, I've seen some kind of, quote unquote fear from fans, but I'm glad that they're doing this. For me, as somebody that's introduced a younger audience to Trek, I'm glad to have even more that will, bring them in. Because we're not sure if Picard's going to be a little bit too mature, maybe for someone that's his age. But I know for a fact that the Nickelodeon series is going to be something that I can immediately introduce him to and know that it's going to be something age appropriate for him.
Yeah, I think Nevins's comments were a little indelicate, which is perhaps not to be surprised from a corporate suit talking about trying to make Star Trek a little more relevant to people. I think it's plenty relevant to people right now. But I think in the context of what he was saying, where he was talking about engaging a younger audience, I think he's talking a bit more about making it relevant to a younger audience, which, given that the franchise's live action shows have moved in a bit more of an adult direction, in which, Discovery is a show that maybe you would show to a younger kid, but probably not. I think that, that's a coin flip for a lot of parents. Having something that does appeal directly to that younger audience is also really valuable. And I think, to the point that you were making, Patrick, about not understanding why some fans are having difficulty with this, I think it's because fans hate change. I mean, I really just think that's what it comes down to, is fans are reflectively against anything that's different from what their perceived comfort zone is. But in reality, an animated Star Trek show that has a really strong appeal to kids, I mean, we've done that once before, and we did it like 40 years ago, a little over 40 years ago, since the motion picture is 40 years old and the animated series came before that. And we talked a decent amount about the animated series in the last couple of weeks because of the new animated series guide that's been released. But, I think one of the core takeaways from that book is, yes, it was Star Trek, but yes, they were also putting in there messages that would resonate with children. I mean, there's a little section from most of the episodes that talks about what the kind of takeaways were for the Saturday morning kids crowd rather than the Saturday morning adult crowd. So we've done it once before. It was successful when they did it. There's absolutely no reason why it won't be successful again. And there's no reason why, with 800 hours of live action Star Trek for us to watch, that adding another 40 or 50 or 60 hours of animated Star Trek specifically pitched to a younger audience is in some way going to ruin the franchise. I just fundamentally don't buy that as an argument that some people have been making. It's so frustrating.
I agree. And like you said, Discovery really is one of those. It's actually the only quote unquote off limits Star Trek for, when I'm sharing Star Trek with my nephew. Especially season 1. I think season 2 we might be able to get away with soon, but it is a little bit more mature. So I'm glad somebody's thinking about these younger, the younger generation that really needs to keep the franchise going for the next 50 years. And even at STLV, I was pretty encouraged because I saw a lot of younger fans this year than I did in 2018. It could have been my own perception, but that's kind of, I saw a lot of cosplay, a lot of parents and younger kids, tweens to teenagers. So I'd love to start seeing some even younger folks that are watching the Nickelodeon show and connecting with those characters at 6, 7, 8 years old and going, well, I love Star Trek because they love the Nickelodeon show. I think that's what I'm most looking forward to, is just, as someone that's, like I said, as someone that's introduced a younger fan, seeing other young fans get into this franchise that we all love so much.
Totally agreed. All right. Well, we'll turn from animated Star Trek and reaching a younger audience away to turning back to 50 years ago to the filming model for the Enterprise, which is currently on display at the Smithsonian. And bad news, if you were planning to see the Enterprise model in the next couple of years, you only got about 2.5 weeks left before they take it off of display at the National Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C. for actually the next few years. So on October 7th, the USS Enterprise model, which has been on display in the hallway of the National Air and Space Museum on the Mall in Washington, D.C., will be packed up and put into storage. The Air and Space Museum is undergoing a significant renovation. I was just down there last weekend, and they've even taken the outer layer off of the walls around the Air and Space Museum. They're more or less entirely rebuilding the building from the inside out. And as a result, a lot of the kind of most famous and most delicate pieces are being moved and stored off-site until such time as the renovation is complete and it's safe to move them back. And the Enterprise is one of the ones that they will be moving off-site. So you have about 17 days left to get yourself over to the Smithsonian. That's what I did last weekend, because despite living in DC the whole time that the model has been back on display, it's always been one of those I'll do it next week things until now, when it is about to go. So I thought I might as well make the trip down there. Amazing model. Happened to get down there at the time where They do turn the lights on the model, so the cells light up and the running lights on the ship, but they only do that a few times a day in order to help preserve the interior and the electronics that they've rebuilt inside the ship. And I just happened to be there about 10 minutes before it turned on, and it was a spiritual experience, to say the least. And it's just so nice to see that the Air and Space Museum, takes this model as seriously as Star Trek fans do, and it's sitting in the hall with the Spirit of St. Louis and other kind of major milestones of American and international flight and space flight, and has pride of place in that hall. So, Patrick, you haven't gotten to see, have you gotten to DC to see the model since it's been on display?
I have not. It's like you said, it's been one of those things that, okay, maybe I'll do it next week, or maybe I can do it next month. It's about a 3.5 hour drive for me, so it's a little bit more difficult to get down there. And it's actually one of those things that my dad actually used to take my sister and I down to DC to see all the museums a lot when we were younger. And it's something we haven't done in a very, very long time. So we've actually been talking about doing it again. And one of my, check off the list was we definitely need to see the Enterprise model, not only for me, but because I know, Nathan, my nephew, would get a kick out of it as well. So when I heard that it was leaving, and for a pretty long time, it seems, depending on what, how they're going to reopen parts of it, because as I read, they said they're going to essentially keep as much open as they can, but, rebuild sections at a time until they're completely done. And it doesn't seem like they're going to be completely done until 2026. Mm-hmm. So I'm hoping it's not out in storage for that long, especially since they're doing this piece seems pretty early on. Maybe it'll return sooner than we think. But I'm definitely disappointed that it's going to be one of those things. It would be a great summer trip, but there was a lot going on this summer for my family and we weren't able to make it down. So it's disappointing that's not an option anymore, right? I'm going to have to wait at least a few years probably for it to be an option again. But reading over what they said about it, I really, like you said, it's great that they take it so seriously. Because they did mention in the article that I had read that because of the fact it's custom designed, the way the case works, the motorized shading, being concerned about temperature and humidity, it just makes more sense for them to completely remove it from the equation and keep it safe while they're doing all this work. So part of me is disappointed that it's going away, but the other part of me says, you know what, it's amazing that the Smithsonian is taking a model for a television show from 1966 as seriously as they are. And that kind of warms my heart a little bit.
And we will very much look forward to its return, whenever that may be. As you say, the renovation to the whole museum is not scheduled to be complete until 2026. If you've been to the Air and Space Museum at any point in the last few years, you'll know how desperately it needs a renovation. It's gotten to be a really tired and rundown building. So it's exciting that they are investing the time and the money into upgrading the rest of the building. So when the Enterprise returns at whatever point it does before the renovation is complete, it will be in a space that is as worthy of the Enterprise as the Enterprise model itself is. And it will be all the more exciting to have it return when it does after being off display for a few years. So yes, disappointing. Get yourself to DC and the National Air and Space Museum by October the 7th if you can. But otherwise, we'll all gather for the rededication ceremony in a few years when it comes back on display. All right, we've talked about the facts, and now let's speculate on what's going to happen in the future of Star Trek.
You make some very good points, Captain. But it's still all speculation and theory.
So each week, I and my guests give you a wish or a theory about the future of the franchise. Patrick, let's hear your theory or wish for this week.
I would say my wish for the week is related to Picard. And I know you talked a lot about this last week. About who's potentially appearing and who's not appearing, what's confirmed, and CBS even coming out with a statement about Michael Dorn and Worf appearing. I am with what you and Ron said last week, and it's my wish that we don't get too many cameos in that first season. I don't want to oversaturate what is obviously attempting to be its own standalone series by throwing in every TNG character from Q down to O'Brien into the series just because you can. While it would be great, I think it'll probably affect the story in a negative way. So my wish is that while I'm happy with the people we know are returning, I'm hoping they kind of leave it at that and just let their own story play out. Because if there's more than one season, as they're talking about, then let's save that for season 2, season 3. So that's my wish is we just, they not stop the cameos, but let's keep it at a minimum so that we can get, see what this great series has to offer by itself.
And let's also not forget, we have this whole new cast of actors and of characters who will also be part of the show. And as much as we love to revisit Riker and Troy and Picard and Data and Seven of Nine, and we will love to revisit those characters, it's also great to get new great characters to love for their own qualities. And the more we have older characters appearing in this show, the less time that gives these new characters to flourish and find their fan base. And, we want to keep adding new blood to the franchise and not just revisiting. So, yeah, I think I'm with you. I am obviously, I think, as I said last week, my fanboy heart wants there to be everybody, but I also recognize that just because I want to only eat ice cream all of the time, that I should only eat ice cream all the time.
Your stomach will eventually hurt.
Exactly. You won't feel good about it either. So my theory this week is that CBS has probably been noting with some interest how the motion picture screenings went this week. We know from earlier this summer at San Diego Comic-Con that there have been conversations about doing a remaster of the Motion Pictures Director's Edition, an HD remaster, which is a very exciting prospect. And given that the motion picture was back in theaters for the theatrical edition this past week, my guess will be that on some PowerPoint somewhere at some point in discussions about the motion picture remaster, that they will look with some curiosity as to how many attended the showings. And it seems like, certainly just off of the anecdotal evidence I have of the theater that I was sitting in, it did seem fairly well attended. The Sunday 1:00 showing here in DC was pretty busy. It was not full, but there did seem to be a decent number of people there. And there was certainly enough interest in the motion picture that certainly in my area, they had 3 showings, 2 on Sunday and 1 on Wednesday. So I really want a director's edition remaster. I think that would be really cool. And I'm hoping that, if the Fandango showings were any kind of a contributing factor to whether they will decide to remaster the director's edition of the motion picture or not, that hopefully it gave them the confidence to proceed with it.
My theater wasn't full either, but there were enough people where I was kind of looking around going, this is nice. Some people coming out for the, 40th anniversary of a movie that wasn't, it isn't known as the best Star Trek movie. Mm-hmm. So I'm with you. I would sign up for that pre-order right now for the director's edition remaster. I do like that version of it better. But as I've heard in the past, it's basically would need redoing all of the special effects and things again, I guess like they did when they remastered the regular version. So I'm all for that. And I hope that somewhere, CBS is looking at it and sees that, hey, there was a lot of interest, and there probably will be a lot of interest around this anniversary if we sooner than later, come out with this director's edition remaster.
Do you have a theory or wish for Discovery, Picard, or the future of the franchise that you'd like to share? Tweet them to me at WeeklyTrek, and I might feature your theory in a future episode. Well, that's all the time we've got for this episode of Weekly Trek. Thank you so much to my guest, Patrick Escudero, for joining me today. Patrick, how can people contact you if they want to continue the conversation?
I am always available on Twitter at PatrickE34. Feel free to reach out to me. My account is mostly Trek babble and praise and theories and retweets. So if Star Trek's your thing, definitely follow me.
And you can find this show on Twitter at WeeklyTrek and me at Alexander T. Perry. And if you enjoy the show, please also consider leaving us a 5-star review on your podcast player of choice. And please check out some of the other great shows on the Tricorder Transmissions. And if you like our shows, please also consider becoming a Patreon of Tricorder, which you can find at patreon.com/the Tricorder Transmissions. And lastly, if you're looking for Star Trek news on the internet, I hope you will turn to trekcore.com. Well, until next week, thank you, Patrick. Thank you to all of my listeners, and live long and prosper.